No. Um, Hello, everyone, and welcome back to From the Farmyard, where we talk about all things homestead and farm related. Today, we are going to be talking about garden designing your garden, what to do before you start planning out your garden, things like that. Our first topic is going to be taking inventory of all your seeds. Might not seem like a big thing, but you can save easily 30 or more dollars
Right.
just not buying as much. Yeah.
It's going through all the seeds that you have stashed, because if you're a gardener, let's be honest, you probably have a lot. I mean, for me personally, I have a lot. And every time I go to the store, I just look it up and I'm like, oh, I need more. It's bad. It's really bad.
I have zero self-control. I placed an
Yeah.
order with Burpee however long ago, and then I went to Walmart the other day and they had seeds there for the first time, and I definitely started grabbing everything that I thought I needed.
Ridiculous. But
And truth be told, I need it. I need them. But I have seeds everywhere. I have a bunch stored together, and then I have a secret stash of seeds hidden elsewhere.
Oh my gosh.
In case the first one gets stolen, I have the second one as a backup. And then I also have books. I also have seeds hidden in books on my bookshelf. So it's like if somebody messes with my secret stash, they also have to deal with the secret stash.
I don't know who wants
all
your
the
seeds.
All the bases are covered with me.
Who's gonna take your seeds?
Well, no one's gonna take books. Nobody in this day even reads, so it's like
the thought process behind this. Anyway, back on topic. We're so easy at straying from the path that we need to go on. I mean, it's ridiculous.
We really are.
Anyway, taking inventory of the seeds that you have, and seeing what you need more of. So maybe last year you planted all your tomato seeds, but you really like the variety, so you wanted to do it again. So it's buying seeds that maybe you liked, seeing what you need more of. And inventory is a good way to save a little extra money because you're not buying extra. So maybe you didn't look through your seeds and you're buying double of something that you already have in your stash. So it's just going through your seeds, also planning out what you're gonna plant, all that stuff.
And with that, I mean, like I did my seed inventory, and then I think 2 or 3 days later, I actually placed the order with Burpee, and I didn't get any duplicates. But I also took into account because they have different seed pack sizes. Like you can get a 2-ounce with some things, you can get a larger packet. So I knew last year that I used about 150 bean seeds for multiple different gardens. So I was just like, instead of buying multiple of the same smaller packet, I can invest in 2 larger ones and get significantly more seeds and still be able to plant. And I also have a bunch of seeds saved and everything else from last year. But take all that into account. And then also, like, when you're you're going to go into the store and buy some of what you thought you had and you didn't have as many as whatever. Account for that, but also limit yourself a little bit. Don't go in and be like, I need every single one of these. But if you know you're going to plant a lot of it, look in buying in bulk with seeds, or just buying a lot more of that when they're available, if you can find them on a deal too.
So take inventory, look through what you have. You can organize it to however you want. You can be a perfectionist and have like literal boxes that says the specific dates or variety, or you can just chuck them into a box. Doesn't matter. However you garden.
Exactly. Gardening is a big scale, from messy gardening to very structured. I'm a good balance, I believe. But also, seed packets from previous years, just because they're opened or they're not opened and they have a date on them, they are not old. They are perfectly safe to grow. They're perfectly fine to grow. You can grow seeds that are 10, 12, years old, and I mean the germination goes down, yeah, but you can still get some.
Right.
And even if you just get one tomato plant off of that, all the seeds that you can save from that one plant can be enough to fill your entire garden next year. So it's definitely worth it to start things even if they're a little bit older. Don't throw them away. You're going to regret it later.
But take inventory, look at what you have. So
Yes.
now that you have your seeds, I would map out your garden. So if you create a layout of, it's a good way to organize your space. So if you had like a massive chart or something and you just like wrote down where all the beds are, maybe not an exact replica, but like gave it like what it would be, just showing where everything's
A rough
at, how much,
outline.
yeah, just like showing how much
Just a,
space you have. It's not going to be exact, but all of this is basically, it's not like a strict. This is just to prepare you and give you an idea of what's going to be happening in your garden, what you need for your garden, and what you're going to do in the future for your garden. So it's just like when you create that layout, you're choosing the places you want to plant your seeds. Maybe your seed needs a little extra sunlight and you have a sunny spot that plant could fit perfectly. Maybe you have a plant that's going to need a trellis, so you have to take that into consideration. Where are you going to put a trellis? Or tomatoes need cages, or zucchini, squash, cucumbers, they blow up. They go everywhere. So
yeah.
keep that in mind with what you're growing, where those need to be planted. You can plan out your garden now while we're in the off season. I mean, as gardeners, we're waiting for that spring and that last frost date. We're waiting because then that means we can start planting and get outside and get our hands dirty. But while we're in the off season, it can be a good idea to, you know, plan out your garden. It gives you something to do, something to look forward to in the future. So
Yeah. And if you're growing in, like, if you're growing the same thing in the same place year after year, you might know how many tomato plants can fit on, like, I use trellis walls,
mm-hmm.
and you might know how many tomatoes can fit on the trellis wall. Account for that. And what I always like to do when I'm starting seeds, I know that's not what we're talking about, but it is somewhat relevant to this.
Right.
I start more than what I know I'm going to need, because I know there's going to be some that don't grow, and if I have extras, I'll find a place to put them, or I'll give them to people. I mean, everybody's
Right.
looking for a tomato plant, and if you can give them to somebody, that's awesome.
Yeah. Start more than what you're planning to plant, because sometimes the seeds may not germinate properly and they may not grow, or they may die along the way, or maybe a cold snap is going to come and kills all your plants that you had in the ground because you had them out too early. So plant more than what you're planning on using, which that'll
Yeah.
be a future episode we'll do about starting seeds indoors,
Yeah.
outdoors, stuff like that. So stay tuned for that.
And also another thing, I mean, we said frost date earlier, but really look at your frost date, and then even when that frost date gets there, just because it's the estimated last frost date, don't go stick everything in your garden. Look at your next 10-day forecast.
Yeah.
And if you get to the end of that 10-day forecast and it's still getting a little chilly, check again.
Yeah.
Keep checking until it's all right to move anything outside.
You want to
And
allow a good
yeah.
buffer there, like a week or two, which is what we do because
Mm-hmm.
we live in a colder climate up here in Pennsylvania. It's just a little bit like chillier. Obviously, our last frost day is May 21st, I think. So we still have a long wait. I still got a long way to go, y'all.
Yeah, mine is April 16th this year, but I usually by April 1st it's warm enough.
Yeah.
I know they're estimating that, but it's been every year that we have been a little bit warmer, but I'm not just going to throw everything in. I'll probably end up waiting until that date or later to actually move transplants out. And when you're looking, and this next point actually brings into what we're going to talk about next with looking at the back of your seed packet. But a little side note with peppers and things like that. peppers need the soil to be above, I think it's 40 or 50 degrees Fahrenheit to actually produce well, or they're going to be really stunted because peppers don't like the cold at all. So anything above 40 or 50, even if you're starting those a little bit later than you would start everything else if you're direct sowing,
Mm-hmm.
it can be, I mean, it can save your peppers and you can get double or triple the yield that you were getting if you were planting them and they had to deal with the cold just
Mm-hmm.
because they're not being stunted. And that
Which,
seed packets won't say that on the back,
mm-hmm.
but it is a good rule. Sorry.
And then I'm gonna add a little bit more to frost date in case you don't know what that is. But like we said, as a gardener about the buffer, you need to, as a gardener, make that decision for yourself. Obviously, look at your temperatures, look at what it's going to be. You don't want to be pushing your plants out of the safe environment of your greenhouse or your growing station, whether it be your grow light or just the area that you have to start your seeds. You don't want to be pushing them out into the cold because seedlings and just the little sprouts, they're fragile. They really are. They're
Yeah.
very touchy. You have to be very careful, and it's not until they fully like take root that they can overcome like a lot of like natural disasters and withstand certain frost temps. But
And also with that, sorry, with moving things out, or like I have a greenhouse, so if we take the cover off our greenhouse, last year I had corn going,
mm-hmm.
I think 2 weeks before our last frost date, just because it was warm enough in there. Even with the temperatures getting a little bit lower outside, it was still warm enough for them to grow. And we took the cover off, and I didn't know it was going to get windy. It got windy, and those corn stalks, all of them blew over. I was out there holding them up because they go from being in a controlled environment where the wind cannot touch them and they're not used to that, to being completely pummeled by 15-mile-an-hour winds.
The things gardeners do to save their crops. I have ran
Exactly.
out in a hailstorm covering my plants with like blankets and it didn't work anyway.
I remember that. That was
depressing.
last year. But with like tomatoes and things like or anything really, I believe, to make the stems, stalks, whatever, stronger, you can actually like run your hand over them, like simulate the wind and just like this the top of your plants, and that can make them stronger.
Right.
And the corn, I think there's also other variables. I didn't plant them deep enough. It's not the point. But if the back of the seed packet will help you. That's what I got to say.
So, like, when it comes to gardening, there are zones. I don't know if you've ever heard of zones before, but there's, like, different zones. So, like, I think mine is zone 5B, and each zone is different, and typically what that zones are according to, like, your growing, like, atmosphere, what you have to work with, like, temperature, frost dates, stuff like that.
And I think zones are only in the U.S., I believe. I think I've seen people say that. They're only in the U.S. If you're not in the U.S.,
which I just learned about.
Really apply to you.
I just learned about zones like not long ago, but it's kind of interesting. Frost dates are honestly they're depicted by zones as well. So each zone is different. Each zone is not going to be the same. So like my zone is not the same as your zone because one, we're in two different states, but our frost dates are also different. So as a gardener, I'm not going to be going off of Zach's frost date because his zone is different than mine. So
mine's like a month and a half earlier than yours.
Exactly. So if I put plants out in my garden when he puts his plants out in his garden, it's not going to work out well. So
and with zones, it's really just telling you the average low temperature for your zone. Because the zones go all across the U.S. and dip a little bit, so you could be in the same growing zone as somebody in Washington State,
right,
or anything else. But it's not really dependent on that. My brain was just like, I'm done. But good. You can be in the same zone, and it doesn't necessarily limit to what you can grow per se. It's just showing you if you're going to plan on having blueberry bushes out in the cold, are your winters getting too cold to where it's going to kill the blueberry plant? Or raspberries, blackberries, whatever, or and then also looking at how many. I think the most important thing, which the zone doesn't even tell you this, well, it kind of does, but like how many days do you have in your growing like in your zone? I have 200, between 200 and like 215, 220.
Mm-hmm.
So I can grow tomatoes on, and I can start tomatoes at the beginning of the season 8 weeks before, transplant them out, and start them another month, almost 2 months later, and I can get another harvest of tomatoes. And green beans, I can succession sow those. You can
Yeah.
succession sow a lot with
Yeah.
longer. You don't have a long growing season, and I know
Right.
I'm sorry, but like I enjoy my long growing season.
Oh, I
So
know
if you
you
can
do.
move.
But as a gardener, these are just a couple things that are super helpful to just learn. So look up your frost date and look up your zone, and it just helps you plan out better and be prepared for future growing. And a way I found that I find my frost date, and I'll have this I'll try to link it. But if you look up the Farmer's Almanac website, and you look up, like, they have a section where they'll show you your specific frost date. You type in your
Mhm.
zip code, and then it pulls up your where you're from, and then it shows you your first and last frost date. And obviously with that information you plan somewhat according. Like we said, you allow a buffer. You're not, it's not going to
Yeah,
be strict, it's not going to be exact. You don't want that, because but
it's
it's
estimated.
right,
It's not.
it's
It's based on the past, I think, 30 years of data that they've collected,
right.
and it's going to change every year. I mean, March 15th could be my last frost date, but I'm not going to put everything in the ground on March 5th. I mean, April 15th. But if March 15th is the last time that we get any cold weather, I don't know what the end of, or the beginning and middle of April is going to hold. So I'm not going to put anything in the ground, even if my temperatures. I mean, if it gets up to 80, I'm starting my garden. I'm sorry. I'm gonna go against that rule, because once it gets about 80 here, we're out of the cold weather for
Yeah.
sure. So
So it's taking all those things into consideration. It helps you plan out better and just organize your garden. But I think
mhm.
there's like one more thing we wanted to talk about to organize a little better. Do you want to cover
It
that? Or you
won't
want
let
me to say it?
me into it. I guess you can't. It's not letting me see it.
Okay.
Crap.
So
It's not showing.
another way to organize your garden is to mark on your calendar when you need to start those seeds. So take into consideration, like we said, frost day. You have that marked on your calendar when your last frosted is. You have a specific time when you want to plant. But let's talk about like starting indoors. Like obviously you can direct
Yeah.
sow outside, but it's a good idea to have your plants started inside so you can just get like a head start getting plants like
Mhm.
ready and prepared for weather and the
Yeah.
outdoors.
And a heads up that I have with that is some things actually don't like their roots messed with at all. And when you're transplanting it, you can affect their roots.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's melons, cucumbers, and something else. You can or you can transplant those, but it's recommended not to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like tomatoes, along the stalk, there's little hairs, and you can, I mean, as far as you cover those down, it's still going to grow and produce more roots. Um, but another thing with transplanting it, on the back of the seed packet, it will say 8 weeks, or start indoors 8 weeks before
Yeah.
your last frost, I think. And when you start that 8 weeks before, you really need to account for, if you're giving them a small space, they're going to stop growing at a certain point. So they're not going to be where they should be. So if I do mine in solo cups, because it's easy, you drill a hole in the bottom for drainage. You can put them in a tray. I like to bring mine outside every day if it's warm enough, and then just bring them back in before the cold at night. And I water them outside, things like that. And it just gets them used to it. But if you don't have a big enough container, pot, whatever, solo cup, it's not gonna grow right. It's gonna be stunted. So solo cups are pretty good range of you can put one plant in there for 8 weeks and it will be fine. So there are other videos and things like that that show you different things. But yeah, about a solo cup is a good size for like tomato plants.
Which
Sorry.
we'll have a video coming out after this one probably about, starting seeds, and we'll probably talk about the different options to start indoors, all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
But a huge help whenever you can, another way, English, oh my gosh. Another way to organize your garden, like we said, is putting on a calendar when you start those seeds. So a big helpful thing is the back of a seed packet. It has a lot of information on there. Sometimes it's helpful. I mean, a lot of times it can be helpful, but sometimes you got to make the call for yourself and kind of plan according to your zone, like we said. But like this tells you when you need to plant them, which state, and like there's like different zones, like it'll show like different colors over the US of like areas, like if you're in the blue area you need to plant in May and June. So it shows you all that. It tells you when to plant inside after when to plant outside after the last frost date, whatever your last frost date is. It'll show you how deep to plant the seed, if you're how far apart you need to space them. There's a lot of stuff on the back of a seed packet that you can just look at for yourself and plan according to the needs of that specific seed and others. But when you get your seeds and you go through inventory, I just did this recently. I went through all my seeds and I looked at when they said about they needed started. And so some of them said 2 weeks, 4 weeks inside beforehand, just throwing out numbers. I don't know what specifically it was, but like start indoors, or it says direct sow outdoors. So go through all your seeds, inventory, like we said, plan according to frost date, plan where you're going to put them with the layout that you just made, or mark on your calendar. That gives you something to look forward to. Hey, those need started soon. And then next thing you know, you have a jungle right in your house, or in your greenhouse, or wherever you're starting plants. So
my calendar last year, I think it had something, at least 2 or 3 things every week that I was either starting or harvesting or pruning or whatever. But we did say this earlier. What we are talking about is, I mean, it doesn't have to be followed exactly by the rule book. It doesn't have to be as structured as we've said. We're doing it for the new gardener who needs help, or who might need help, or whatever. But it doesn't have to be
grow the way you grow.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be structured. It doesn't have to be messy or
organized or whatever you're gardening, however you do it, your cup of tea. Not everybody has to like it. It doesn't. Gardening is to be enjoyed, I think, and it's such a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
And you want to enjoy it. You don't want to have like this just like fear that you're doing it wrong. Don't have that. Just gardening is a place where you can, wrong. Right. Gardening is a place where you can let go, put some seeds in the ground, watch them grow, and you learn through the process.
And if it brings you joy, I mean, my policy is if it brings you joy, don't listen to other people. They're going to criticize everything you do. Well, not everything, but a lot of times people will criticize every single thing, and don't listen to them. If you are sharing on Instagram or YouTube or whatever, and you get a handful of comments that are saying you're doing this wrong, whatever, don't listen to them. You're not doing it wrong. It's how you prefer to grow. I grow tomatoes in 5-gallon buckets. There are plenty of people who do it, but a lot of people will say that's wrong. Growing them in a raised bed is wrong. It's everybody, and we've said this on a reel, we've said this on everything. Everybody's right is different. It's not a set way, or it's everything. I'm growing in kiddie pools. I'm actually doing all of my peppers in a kiddie pool this year because they don't, from my understanding, their roots don't need that much soil, and I'm filling it up a little bit more than I would. And I hope it gets a little bit warmer because peppers like the warmth, and the warmth will be provided in that.
Mhm.
So do your own thing. If it brings you joy, it brings you joy. What I do is I start a bunch of seeds in on my arch trellis, and I will wait for them to all to grow. I'll see little gaps here and there, and I'll fill a sunflower in here or a zinnia here just to fill everything in. I don't like bare earth when I'm
and
planting, but
and
like
that's the way that you
it's fun.
grow. That's the way you do it. Some people may think like, oh,
Mhm.
you're choking out certain plants or whatever. Like that's not good for the soil, or let's just say, I'm just throwing things out. But like,
Yeah,
grow the way you grow. Do it the way you want to, because gardening is it's growing, it's cultivating. You're cultivating your plants,
yeah,
but you're also cultivating yourself. You're learning. You're
yeah.
growing in
And it's steward.
knowledge.
hmm And it's stewarding what we've been given here on Earth
Hmm.
for. I mean, the way that I believe it's the way that it was intended to be, and
Yes.
a lot of
Yeah.
people do. And I garden organically because of that, which we've said this previously in videos. It's spraying nothing in your garden using all
Right.
natural growing practices.
And that's not
That's the way that I
everybody's
prefer to.
that's not everybody's cup of tea. Some people like to do sprays
Exactly.
because they want a prolific harvest, but I mean, as us as organic growers, we see the possible harm that can come from sprays, and we choose not to do that. So it's choosing your path and the way you want to garden, and
And I
just
like seeing things in my garden, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I'll come out here and I love hearing the bees buzzing, seeing the butterflies flapping around, having the spiders in the garden. As much as I hate them, the spiders, that is, I
Yeah.
enjoy having them there because they're doing so much better in my garden than somewhere else, because you will get bugs, you will get flies, whatever,
Right.
from rotten tomatoes, whatever, if you're not staying on top of it. And the spiders will help. Ladybugs will eat aphids. I'm not so sure about the bees and butterflies. I think they're just there to pollinate, but it's good having something pollinating, and it's how it was intended to be.
Make your garden your little happy place where you should be able to go out to your garden and pull weeds, like, and not have to be like stressed about like, oh, I'm doing this wrong, oh, I'm doing this wrong. You can take those people's opinions, you can take them, but through those opinions you can learn, like, could I do it better, could I do it better? But you don't have to do it the way those people say. You can do it your own way. But like we said, it's learning. It's a lot of learning, and over time
And
you
sometimes,
will
yeah,
grow the garden the way you like it to be your happy place, the place you can go where you can just sit and enjoy nature. That's what I do all the time. Whenever
yeah,
my garden's in full swing, I'm always out there pulling weeds. Pulling weeds is fun to me at this point because it's just like my
it's
stress-free
therapeutic
zone.
too. It's very therapeutic too. But I've seen with people, I mean, I've read a whole bunch of things, just been a fly on the wall watching different things on Facebook, whatever, Instagram, and I'll read comments. And a lot of times, what people are saying, like if you're growing and you have um, limitations that other people don't have, they might say, hey, or if they've done something the same way that you're doing, but they had a different outcome than you're having, they might say, hey, this is an easier way or something. And you
Right.
might take that as criticism, but I think we need to start thinking about it as constructive criticism, because they've been in your shoes. If they're an older gardener, you don't have to listen to everything an older gardener says. As helpful as they are at times, I mean, times have changed. My great grandparents, I put in a garden for them, and they haven't had a garden for 60, 70 years. And how things were 60 or 70 years ago are not the same way that they are now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's seeing, I mean, because they weren't growing, or they were growing organically then, or they were spraying stuff and they thought, hey, it's fine, we're killing the bugs, we're getting a better harvest, whatever. But now I'm looking at it and I'm like, I'm not spraying anything. Or if they have I mean, my great grandmother has cancer. She's not supposed to be eating a whole bunch of stuff that's been sprayed on things. So I garden organically for that reason, but also because I think it's better for the earth. And Jessica at Roots and Refuge puts it the best way that I've ever heard it. You're not feeding your plants, you're feeding the soil. If you have good soil, you will ultimately grow amazing plants. But when you're doing that, when you're spraying and everything, you're taking away the nutrients from the soil, and it's not benefiting anything long term. So I'm done. Sorry. I'm done now.
You're fine. We both shared our opinions. It's good stuff. So, all in all, I think that's good. Yeah, good soup. Oh my gosh. Okay. Bring it together. Come on. Come back. Okay, here we're back now. Okay, we're good. Okay. Okay. Anyway, I think that's everything for today's episode. Our advice to you is during this off season where you're not gardening, look through your seeds, get out there and look at your garden, form a layout, plan out what you're going to do in the coming year so you can be fully prepared for the next growing season. Thanks y'all for watching. We'll see you on the next one.
Thank y'all. We'll see you next one.